Nike Laguda. I am a volunteer with Karen Jackson under the program's operations of PMI. I am going to introduce our speaker for today. His name is Hans Ekman. And I think we've had Hans as a speaker before. That's why we brought him back. We enjoy his speaking and his interactive way of engaging us. So today the title for this afternoon's speech is Becoming a Leader When Working with Offshore and Distributed Teams. Hans is going to kind of educate us on how to learn the best practices, tricks, and pitfalls for adapting activities to optimize projects that work with offshore and distributed project teams from our speakers. We're going to hear from him this afternoon. Now let's have a little, if you all don't know Hans before, I do, and I've heard about him, but I'll give you a little background about him. Hans Ekman provides transitional management and consulting for growing companies. He has about 20 years of experience, but 14 out of those 20 years experience is spent in implementing web-based solutions across diverse industries. He is currently working as a senior business analyst at the SunTrust Bank with the enterprise architecture team, and he provides process improvement and mentoring support through the Business Analyst Center of Excellence and CPMO. I like to speak about just a few, not the, if I have to tell you all the list, it's too long, but we know that Hans is proficient in the following: business process optimization, executive dashboards, prototyping, feasibility studies, system development, SDLC, that is the software development lifecycle implementation, strategic planning, and outsourcing management. It is my pleasure this afternoon to introduce our speaker for today, Hans Ekman.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for having me here. Hopefully the mic and my annoying booming voice will carry enough. If I start going too fast or say something that doesn't make sense, please interrupt me and I'll stop. So what I want to do to start is go over just a few ground rules. First is, this session's for you, so please participate. I know over lunch, find time in between the bites of the delicious pasta, but really, this is interactive. I'm here so that you can get the most out of it, so please feel free to ask questions and let me know. Interrupt me during it for any clarifications, anything that doesn't make sense, or any questions you have. But if we're getting into other questions, application, why might my management team support these efforts, let's save those to the end so that we make sure we have a chance to get through all the slides. Also, I have to throw in the SunTrust disclaimer that they have no responsibility for the content of this presentation. I'm doing it on my own. They didn't endorse it, so the legal department is now happy. And also that no animals were harmed during the creation of this presentation, but please do support your local pet rescue groups. So what should we expect today? First, we're going to talk a little bit about why do people outsource, and what are the current challenges we're experiencing. Also, what are some of the core changes that you need to make to improve the results you're getting? Also, we're going to talk about tips for improving projects and even personal success when dealing with offshore distributed teams. And finally, we'll save some time at the end for questions and discussions. Sound good? Okay. So let's take a look at some offshoring numbers. More than half of Fortune 500 companies push some portion of their IT work offshore. And these are 2009 numbers from a white paper provided by Bamboo Software. Offshore outsourcing of IT has grown 50% annually over the last 5 years. 75% of the cost of developing software is your labor costs. So that's another reason you're seeing a lot more go offshore. Companies spend more than 10% of their IT budgets recruiting and training staff. Offshore savings estimates are about 25 to 50% off of domestic only. PricewaterhouseCoopers reported that 68% of respondents actually reported an increase in quality in the software that they were developing. So one of the surprising things, or the turnarounds that's really happened over the last 5 years, is that now we're actually getting equal or better quality offshore than we were with our local development groups and development companies. And as no surprise, India represents 75% of IT offshoring revenue, although China is on the rise quite a bit, which we can talk a little bit more if anyone's interested at the end. So, is outsourcing a good idea or a bad idea? What are some of the thoughts of why companies would outsource? This is the participation, so just shout out some answers of why we should, what are some good or bad reasons why we might want to outsource?
Good is, like you mentioned, to increase their bottom line, ROI.
Okay, so you increased ROI. Yep.
It's not a core competency of the company to begin with.
Absolutely. You don't have the skill set, not a core competency. What are some other reasons?
Bad one is customer service.
Bad one is you could actually decrease your customer service. Yep. Other thoughts?
Perception.
The perception of offshoring?
It's taking away off jobs from America.
Okay, yep, we're getting rid of jobs, we're shipping them overseas. So some of the reasons is, these are the perceived reasons, that it's going to be lower cost, that it's going to increase your workable hours. You basically can do almost around-the-clock development. Another is idiocy or ignorance. Everyone else is outsourcing, so we need to start an outsourcing program, even though we have no idea why we're doing it. Regulations, taxes, and unions. The fact is that there are less restrictions on work hours, pay, working conditions, benefits offshore, overseas, so that reduces your overall cost for man-hour. Basically, you're looking at 25 to 30% above the salary of a full-time employee goes into benefits. The work ethic is different. You actually do get typically a higher work ethic when you're going offshore. We'll take a look at that. It removes overhead, so you can hide numbers in different parts of your balance sheet. As mentioned, you just lack the internal skill. Also, time to market. Sometimes offshoring will, you have to get to market in a certain time period, and the only way to ramp up and get that done is with an offshoring team or an offshoring or distributed company, an outside company that can get that done for you. And then also scalability, that you can grow much faster. So these are some of the reasons why people offshore. The reasons that you actually would want to outsource are, it's a better value, or when it is a better value. You're getting more results, more value for your dollar. It gives you greater capacity. It does increase the available working hours. You are missing the expertise, as we point out. That's a great reason. Another is disaster recovery. The fact is if you have distributed offices, distributed systems, distributed development environments, your chances of having a catastrophic failure and not being able to recover are greatly reduced, and a much faster onboarding. You have a pool of trained resources, whether you're hiring another company distributed here or an offshore company, that are available to start immediately. And for anyone that is trying to eat and take notes, the presentation will be available, so just add in whatever additional notes you want, but that will be available to you. So let's take a look at some of the cultural challenges that we get with offshoring or distributed modeling. One of the things is, as you go from east to west, as you go across Asia, you see a dramatic increase in conformity. These are more conformist societies, which means they are more by-the-books programmers, more by-the-books process, more show me exactly what you want to do and I will replicate it. The counter to that is, what we're more known for is creativity. That if you want a completely new solution, you need people to solve problems not in a traditional way or to come up with a very creative solution. Typically, you're better off coming closer to US and US-based resources. Now, that gap is shrinking. We're seeing a lot more creativity, a lot more development in our Eastern markets that are trying to push more creative solutions, more creative thinking, sending more people over here for school and work, bringing them back to infuse into their companies to help them evolve and be able to compete in a market that doesn't just do the same thing better, but can do new things that the market needs. So let's take a look at some of these cultural differences. One is, here, we tend to really value or be more self-taught, where you pick up a coding book and you start using it, or you pick up the PMBOK and start learning how to become a project manager, and you go online and you take videos and you attend training classes, maybe, but you're probably doing it self-paced. Other than education, I have not taken a technology course, and that's been my industry for 15 years. Whereas almost everybody, when you get from India through China, it's all school-based learning. The number of graduate and doctoral students being pushed out in the universities in China with computer science degrees, management information degrees, is astounding. Many of these people are working for free for a year, hoping that the company will then hire them because there is such a talent surplus and lack of jobs in China, and because of our current immigration, it is very restricted as to the number of qualified people and high-tech people we're able to bring in. Also, it is culturally a very literal interpretation. So one of the clients I worked for that was a major retailer was having a kind of a lessons learned meeting because they had just found out that the software that was built and delivered doesn't work. Didn't do anything they needed to do, and they were panicking. They were like, what could have gone wrong? I thought we were really clear. And the project manager actually summed it up perfectly. He said, you know what? They gave us exactly what we asked for, and that's what the problem is. So really, you've got to watch off when you say something. Another example is with SunTrust today. We static test our requirements. So the requirements go to the testing team to make sure they're not ambiguous, that they make sense, that they're testable. And we had a defect log because one of the requirements said that users/actors will be able to log into the system, or be able to reset their password. And they logged a defect saying you cannot divide users by actors because they saw the slash mark. Did not understand that it was meant as an either or. There's also little tolerance for inconsistencies. We kind of read for context, we read for content, we interpret and make conclusions and then run off and do something. India, not as much. They really are reading and trying to do exactly what you said, which means you miss a comma, they're going to point it out. You aren't consistent or missed a certain portion of your data requirements. You're going to miss that. If your project schedule is missing certain activities, it's going to be stressful for them. Also, you're dealing with people where English is a second language. So there is going to be translation difficulties. It also means they don't get jokes or sarcasm. And boy, has this been a hard one for me. I worked with an amazing Chinese developer for a couple of years, and finally we got to the point where he would stop and say, oh, you're making a funny, aren't you? And then would stop and realize that he didn't really have to do what I was suggesting. Also, you're dealing with groups that have a completely different contextual view from everything from family life to business to environment. It's completely different. When I was working with a team in India, they had done a gap analysis, a market analysis between the products and services the company I was with was offering and the products and services similar businesses in India offered. And they came up with a whole laundry list of things that we needed to do and were missing based on their local operations. And I sat down with them and had to explain to them that everything on their list was things that we never wanted to do, because it was the exact opposite of how customers here looked at those products and services. So, one of the important things, especially as you're managing these efforts, as you're working with these teams, the further offshore, the further away from your cultural basis you get, you need to make sure that you properly communicate three key areas. One is, you have to communicate the business. These are groups that don't know how you operate. Often you'll say, well, we don't do that here, but we don't do it that way. They're not going to know. They're going to have to learn that. You're going to have to translate for them. You're going to have to set that context. The other is an understanding of the market. You know, what are the market conditions? What is it your customers are looking for? Any information you have, market research, analysis, even sitting down with different subject matter experts and recording lunch and learns that they can play back as they bring new people on will help them understand the context for the solution that they're creating. Also, you have to really understand the audience. You know, this is both internal and external, is communicating who is the end consumer of the work. What is it they're looking for? What is the format that works best for them? And also, look at what you're communicating to. If you've got a very structured, very organized group, you're going to have to be that much more organized and structured. If you've got a group that is more flexible, then you can probably loosen up a little bit. So a couple communication challenges that you really have to overcome too. One is, for the most part, you're dealing with asynchronous communication. Send a message, wait for a response. Send an IM, get back a faster response. You may have overlapping work periods, especially with India. You've got about a 3 to 4 hour working block because most people there will work till 9 p.m. anyway. So you've got, with a 7.5 hour time difference, you've really got a window that you could meet and try and do more collaborative work. If not, you send it over and then hope what comes back is what you're looking for. Also, you're dealing with fragmented or incomplete communication. They are only seeing what you are intentionally communicating, what you're posting, what you're sending to them. Everything else you know, everything else that you bump into the water cooler is gone. There's none of that accidental knowledge that we take for granted when you're working with a team on a daily basis. Which also means that unless you intentionally do it, it's going to be lost. So what are some ways to improve the current engagement approach? One is to, hold on, let me see where I'm going with this, sorry. Okay. So in our current model, there's really two ways that we're dealing with offshore, or most companies are dealing with offshore. One is our resources, or your company's resources, assign tasks to other workers, which is basically a pure staff augmentation model. So in that, I have, oh, come on. Tell me my yellow arrows are showing. Okay, sorry, the projector, your yellow arrows aren't showing up. So I will draw them by hand. Basically, you have your resources just sending out tasks, assignments to different resources that are expected to do it. The other way is when you just completely throw it over the fence. You give them the entire product, the entire project, an entire area. You say, here's what I want, toss it over, and then you get something back at the end and hope that it works. So I apologize with the screen that you can't see the yellow arrows. I will get that fixed. When we're looking at our team structure, and a lot of this, since I come from a software and IT background and a lot of project management falls, I apologize to anyone who is representing a different area or industry. But that's where a lot of my focus is going to be, is you have a project manager. Their primary communication is with an architect, a tech lead, a test lead, a business analyst, by role, not necessarily. You may have a person playing multiple roles. And with those core leads in yellow, they then are the center point, the focus, the leader for their team. So they're responsible to make sure that everything that their team produces is consistent with what the project manager is planning. And that's onshore. So the best way to make this work, and the best way I've seen this work, is to actually mirror that plan offshore. What it means is make sure you have a project manager with your offshore company, or with your offshore group, or even with your distributed group. If you're hiring one of the consultancies, or a software development, or a building company here, make sure you have a project manager that at the end of the day owns that relationship, owns the success of the project. They are then going to communicate and manage the daily activities of their tech and dev leads, their technical teams, and their testing teams. Now the reason I'm limiting it to there is most of your architecture, most of your advanced design isn't going to be offshore. It's going to come from your senior people. Most of your business analysis, most of your subject matter expertise is going to be your onshore resources. You then set up a communication path between peers. So your tech lead with your group interfaces directly with the tech lead offshore. Test lead and test lead. That way you have your primary communication and a backup communication chain or failover point with the project manager who can ensure that everything is being done according to schedule and plan. Then you add in your secondary communication. This can be intentional, this can be casual, this is more of your, to get certain aspects done, to get certain tasks done, you'll end up using indirect communication. So there are times where the tech lead, the test lead, and the business analyst will be working directly with or communicating with the offshore project manager. The test lead and the dev lead offshore need to be coordinating their efforts. They need to be sharing knowledge. Your business analyst will also be providing clarifications, training, support for both the tech teams and the test lead. Any questions on this setup? One of the main pieces that I've seen with companies that aren't successful in offshoring is they do more of the throw it over the fence or the augmentation model where they're just having their teams throw it directly over and you're losing that management key. Because there's so many, the PM plays such a vital role in coordinating a project, you really missing that offshore is just insane to me. It is perceived as an extra cost because you're basically adding one of the highest priced resources you'll buy, because most testers or developers that have proven themselves want to become project managers, because then project managers can become business managers and business managers can get promoted, and that's the only way you'll ever be able to buy a house. So let's take a look at some project approach improvements. These are some things that will make your efforts more successful. One is, throughout the life cycle, maintain the understanding of the business context. Have refreshers. Make sure you're showing how things fit into that overall goal. Review them with your key business features, with your business requirements. Make sure you're tying those back in. You've got to establish communication through both formal and informal. Set up your formal communication first. It's like an extension of project reporting. Set up your status reporting, your chains of communication. And then also look for where the informal communication is going to happen. Know that if you have tech leads working together or technical people working with your testers, that they're going to reach conclusions. They're going to plan out things, and you've got to be in touch with those. Also, engage your leads as early as possible. Rely on your leads. That is your core team. Regardless of how you staff beyond that, these are going to be the people that are primarily going to determine the success of your project. So use developers, QA, BA, or PM for your supporting artifacts and tasks. They'll help contribute to the charter. They'll help continue to contribute to the overall solution. They can be a phenomenal sounding board when you're sitting down with your stakeholders to understand, even if you tell them to just listen and then have an after meeting where you can find out their response. Also, you may want to shift your hours. Create a virtual Scrum environment. When I was working for an offshore company, I would get up and start working at around 5 or 6 in the morning. I'd work for a couple hours until 9 o'clock when basically they were winding down. I'd then get prepared for the day and roll into the office about 10, 11 o'clock or go to the client site. That way I had a good 2 to 4 hours in the morning, depending on what I needed of overlap time, and then I had anywhere from 2 to 6 hours of client-facing time or company time to resolve the issues with our current staff. The other is, as much as it may pain people, you have to develop detailed documentation. When you're dealing with a very literal, a very structured, a very predictable group, the documentation is key. So where companies get off is they say, well, I can't do offshoring and Agile because Agile doesn't have documentation and it's built on these short sprints. Not if you're doing Agile right. I did Agile for an offshore company and did a near impossible 2-week sprints, with 1 week of that being overlapping requirements for the next sprint. And we pulled it off. What it means is you're defining your time box, you're defining your iteration, what will be done. You're doing the detailed documentation, the detailed design, the reviews, the testing during that time box, and then moving on to the next one. So just because you're moving into iterative, just because you're moving into Agile, just because you have a Scrum where you freely exchange ideas, does not replace the need for documentation, and it's even more important offshore. The other is you need to validate intermediate detail, deliverables. Catch mistakes as early as possible. Wired Magazine had an article about 4 or 5 months ago about the success of Pixar. How is it that a company can produce blockbuster after blockbuster every year with the most amazingly diverse storylines, characters, from cars to bugs? I mean, it's pretty amazing. And they have actually implemented a formal model. When the very first concept of a movie comes out, they pitch it in an auditorium, and anybody participates, and they try to shoot it down. But it's all done in a positive way. So they have failed so many times at the beginning of the project that they're not failing when it's costing $1 million a minute to re-render something. So the more you can set up these intermediate reviews, that is going to be one of your keys to risk mitigation with offshore. And don't exclude the business from this either. The more they can get snapshots or reviews, even if they're not seeing what it is you're building, they need to know and need to see that there's progress being made. So here's a few success tips for working with offshore teams. One is create longer engagements. People here tend to get bored and want to roll off projects or want to work on projects that might be 3 to 9 months. When you're dealing with offshore, when I've talked to resources, they want to stay in a domain area with an application at a minimum of 2 years, sometimes 5. Because the way they measure success is, do I really understand this application? Do I really understand this business area? So if you start taking them off that area after 6 months, after a year, they're going to quit the company. They're going to leave because they want to really learn, and just when they're starting to get comfortable, they get shifted and have to start all over. So the longer you can keep those subject matter experts. Now, where you need staff augmentation, focus on your leads. Keep your leads in key areas, and then just fill in warm bodies when you need more testers, more coders, more producers. Use modeling and examples. Flow charts, use cases, diagrams, snapshots, annotated screenshots, anything you can do, or coming up with ways that they might understand the business context and what you're trying to achieve with the solution. So visual really does help. Also, use clear, unambiguous language and define your terms. We are acronym heavy here. That gets lost. A lot of our slang, a lot of our little phrases, if you tell them to throw the baby out, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, they're not going to have any idea what you mean. And they're really going to ask you, sit back, what baby? There's no baby in this project. So also define your terms. You rely on your BA, if you have one, for maintaining a glossary, using collaborative sites like any of your content management systems or SharePoint, where you can keep a repository for this information, and you won't believe how much information they will contribute as they learn things. They will be the main contributors to this area. Also, try and manage through shorter, more actionable tasks. Giving a big, vague area is stressful. The more you can break it down or have your teams break it down into measurable groupings, shorter iterations, shorter deliverables that can be reviewed, you're going to be more successful. And then use your leads to see how those need to be assembled. And the last one is, if you expect something, you've got to inspect it. You cannot take anything for granted, and that goes anywhere in life. If you expect something, make sure and inspect it. So what about personal opportunities? Where are the chances you have to shine as individuals or as leaders when dealing with offshore? The first thing is, or distributed teams, the first thing is take the time to understand your team. Plan in time during your meetings for more social discussions. Set up times with team members to chat and learn about their lives, about the culture. If you get a chance, take a trip and really understand what's going on. And it'll be an eye-opening experience. When I had a chance to go visit one of our offshore partners, the people who had never traveled overseas were terrified for the first week, and then really started to get in the flow, and then really understood and appreciated what was going on, and came back with some phenomenal ideas of how we could work better and better support our teammates. Also, when you need to provide feedback, but you also want to make sure and include as much positive feedback. So many teams I've talked to have been very depressed, where they have worked all night, all weekend, trying to hit a rush deadline, and then didn't hear anything. And they're like, what happened? This was a crisis. What happened? And you're like, it was fine. That's why we didn't say anything. We only tell you when stuff is bad. The teams get really depressed. They really want to know that what their work is appreciated. So every time you close an email, a chat, thank them for their work. Try and pull out their contribution. Tell them how it's being used. And you'll really get a group that will work even harder because they really believe in what you're doing and the fact that their work is appreciated. Also, be open to self-criticism. Now this one was really hard for me because I take a lot of pride in the work I produce, especially working as a BA, the documentation that I'm doing. And I've established a clarifications log. So basically, I send over a document or a portion of a document, they read through it, and then they log clarifications, things that they don't understand or think that need to be changed, and they log that back, and then I deal with it. And then there's times where I'll get the same issue 4 or 5 times, and I'm like, come on guys, you've got to get this. And then I sit back, and after about the second time it goes, I'm like, maybe I'm the idiot in this equation. And then I look, and then I read, and then I take a second going, you know what, they're right. It could be interpreted that way. I need to change this, I need to fix it. I wasn't wrong, but I certainly wasn't doing the best job I could. So it's really hard to open up when you are the expert, especially when you're a leader. The PM owns the project. Success is based on your work. And then to take criticism from these little offshore people who we're not paying that much to, you know, at first it kind of breaks your nails, but it really will help. Also, volunteer. If there is an opportunity to work for offshore with your group, or if you see one, step up and take it. There's a lot of people that are terrified, but you never know where that's going to lead you. And it will also help give you that experience and could lead to other great opportunities within your company or within other companies. Also, share these project successes with others. Have lunch and learns. You know, not necessarily as formal as white paper, but get together with your peers, get together with your managers, and show them what worked well. Show them where they were getting value. Then you become the model, which makes you much more valuable, much more marketable. So, a couple conclusions. First, you have to understand your audience to be successful. So really focus in, and I would say most of your prep time, most of your upfront time, most of your high value time is going to come from really understanding the audiences you're dealing with. The other is develop strategies to turn weaknesses and difficulties into your strengths. That's where I came up with the clarifications log. When I had groups that were so literal, so precise, that I couldn't just let them redline documents because it wasn't working. So we created a 8-field spreadsheet to log these issues. And it took off like wildfire. I use it with testing and development and have them coordinate so that I'm not answering the same questions more than once. Also, seems kind of obvious, but we forget it. To be a leader, you have to take action, not follow directions. If you're going to be a leader, you've got to be the one to step out. You've got to be the one to take this to the next level, to volunteer, to I won't say control, but to facilitate the success of these projects. So the good news to save note takers is this presentation will be available for download on the Atlanta PMI Atlanta website. And also if not by the end of today, definitely by the end of the weekend, I'll also have this posted to my personal website along with other presentations I've done. So you're welcome to leverage the material. If you reuse it or reuse more than half, please give me credit. But definitely share the information with others who might be able to benefit from it. Or if there's other groups or companies that would like me to talk or work with them, I'm more than happy to do that. So for the fun part, let's get to questions and see what I can help answer for you. Yes, sir.
Got a general question, Hans. Would you share with us your perspective on where all of this offshoring of technology is heading? Let's just say 10 years from now, what's it going to look like? For the U.S. economy as well as their economy, how's it going to work out?
I think you're going to see a greater stability in India with the general offshoring. So companies that are using offshoring for anything from routine data processing to development services to testing, you're going to see really it's stabilized as if you had offices in 2 different buildings in 2 different states. It's going to be that stable. On the customer service side, on the help desk side, I think you'll get to the point where you're 80% happy. The language skills are picking up, the cultural influences. So I think 10 years from now, it is going to be a viable option for 24/7 support with generally the same quality of care you're getting here. I think 10 years from now, China is going to be where India is now, although China is much better at reverse engineering than anyone, so they may actually hit that in the 5-year mark. One of the problems that China has is it's really a cultural difference that I don't think they're going to get over for a long time. I had a chance to meet with a product manager from REI. They were opening up a factory in China, and so they were part of the advanced team before the managers came to see their brand new factory, or the companies that were going to be producing their goods. And they had a giant banner over the front door that said, "We will proudly reverse engineer anyone else's product for your company." And he walked up, he's like, "You better get that sign down before my management team comes here, because you're basically telling them that you're going to steal our designs and give them to any company that wants to reproduce them, and that's not cool." But that's the idea, is anything that's out there is reusable. It's like if I pick up a penny off the ground, I get to spend it. Sure, someone else made it, sure it was someone else's, but it's there, why am I not using it?
What are the implications for someone who might be in the IT profession or thinking about going in the IT profession in the U.S.?
I think it's outstanding. So there's always been a lot of fear is, are we getting rid of our jobs? Are we throwing them over? Well, your more remedial jobs, your pure tester, your pure coder, the groups that do basically the same thing day in and day out, those jobs aren't going to be here. You may be able to get one for a short period of time as you're coming up, but those jobs are going to be gone just like the factory jobs are gone today. Also, culturally, we don't have the patience to deal with it. We don't do the same thing over and over again for our entire career and are happy with our lives. Where it really is a great opportunity is leadership positions. All of your leads, all of your tech leads, all of your development leads, all of your project management, those skills are going to become much more marketable because you're going to really need the people that are going to rely. So you're going to see project managers that are almost acting as product managers, BAs acting as subject matter experts who are leading these efforts. So from a management standpoint, I think you're going to see the people who have those leadership skills, the people that take the time to work on their communication skills, are going to be bumped up into a whole new pay grade down from your general producers.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments, personal? Yes?
What are you seeing as far as the market term now as far as nearshoring in South America?
That's interesting. I have seen a number of attempts to make it work, and none of them have got off the ground, and I don't know why. So I've talked to different people and different companies, and actually even groups I was with looked at that as an option. Mexico being one place. The problem we found in Mexico was skilled labor and education isn't there. They don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the stability, you can't even count on power. So a lot of your Central and South America, there's too much turmoil, the standard of living is too low. You still have that low standard of living in China, but it's in pockets. So people who want those jobs go to the city where it has the infrastructure. The people in the countryside don't have electricity sometimes. Canada has been popular, but Canada also has much higher inflation. So your cost of going to Canada often is more expensive. I'm seeing a lot more Australia, New Zealand companies, especially in IT, pop up. That gives you roughly a 12-hour difference. And they also have the language in common, the culture in common. So I think you're going to really see companies in that area really be some of the next, I won't say Microsoft and Google's, but your next Cisco's of the world, where you've got some very powerful companies coming out of that area. But they're going to open up offices here. They're going to want people that can respond on our work schedule. So they may be headquartered offshore, but they're going to have a local presence just like any other company. And I haven't seen anything coming out of Africa or Antarctica. South Africa is an exception, though. They do have decent high tech, and I did know one of the best .NET developers I've ever worked with, who's actually helping Microsoft troubleshoot .NET 3.0 because he found bugs that they didn't know were there. He actually had a company there and left because the violence, the security was too much. So if the country is able to stabilize certain cities so that they have secure living, South Africa, I think, that economy could really blossom quickly. But just the safety issue, the family security, computer companies get broken into almost weekly, and there's just no way around that. You can't survive. Other questions? Anyone else have experiences, problems, work with offshoring that they want to share or mention? Yes, sir.
Do you see any value added in bringing offshore on-site first? I mean, because there's multi-year agreements of bringing them on-site so they understand the corporate culture?
Absolutely. So using SunTrust as a model, they've established a program where we'll bring people onshore, usually for 2 to 4 years, depending on how long they want to stay, and then they go back. Even though it is a much higher cost to us, the value that they get working with our teams, coordinating and being able to translate back to their teams, they end up becoming those team leads in the model. So, I'll go back. Those team leads end up being onshore with you, and then they have lesser counterparts. So that's really great. The other thing that we took advantage of is SunTrust has a program where twice a year we send a large group of people over to work for a couple weeks on site with them, and I got to participate in that program. So for a lot of people, it's their first exposure to the culture, the working conditions. They make new friendships, and you really do understand what's going on. And I think that can often be as valuable. When senior managers go over, they miss the mark. Because they go over and they get the dog and pony show. They get the tour of the campuses. They get the nice restaurants, the entertainment. They don't sit down with somebody working on a project and know what happens. Any of your project leads, any of your middle managers, I'd absolutely recommend sending them over to spend, 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks would be a good time. 2 seems to be the industry standard for those types of visits. Okay. I don't know how we are on time. Oh, okay. Any other questions?
Well, since we've got time, I've got one. I'd like to leverage your knowledge base, a little bit unrelated, but we know that there is software is a driver of the economy. It's becoming, microprocessors are being put into everything. Software that operate on these is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's going to become more so. I'm sorry, I'm an economist, so my questions are sort of macro, pardon the pun. And so intelligence is being built into software like never before, so that you have all these decision trees and it can do things that was never done before. As far as our economy is concerned, what part of that do you see as IT contributing to it? That is, what percentage of our overall productivity and growth in the economy might be attributable to this area in which you have expertise, whether in the U.S. or offshore? Just wanted to tap your knowledge base.
Yeah, I think it is going to continue to be important, but in answering the other question, India they have a number of companies that are trying to be technology innovators. They're developing new software, they're developing new products. Now, in a lot of cases, they haven't come out with anything that's really a super competing product yet, but that's just a matter of time. That will come. So technology, I think, is still going to be a cornerstone of the industry, but I think you're going to see it in more applied niches, like biomedical, like certain applications. We're way behind the curve on mobile. I mean, nowhere close to what Japan and China are doing, so we've got a lot of catch-up to do, or we're going to end up tapping what they develop for new needs, or we're going to find other models of using it, or we're going to create more Angry Birds applications that are wildfire, offer little social value, but make a lot of money or are very popular. So I think you're going to see those. In terms of something you touched on that I want to bring up as well, programming business logic, business intelligence, artificial intelligence, not talking robots, but actually being able to use data, analyze data for patterns, trends, and predictive analysis is a chance we really have to explode if we really back it. UGA now has a master's program in artificial intelligence. It's one of 2 in the nation, which I just learned about a couple weeks ago. And the work they're doing is phenomenal. And we say, well, okay, yeah, you could predict the stock market. Not necessarily, but what about all your traffic routing? And if you could solve and do dynamic traffic routing, what would that do to your local economy and standard of living? So my rule of thumb is never program business logic where a human needs to make a decision. If somebody needs to make a decision, don't ever try and program the logic for that decision, because the minute you program it, the minute you set it, that's only true if none of your variables change, none of your market conditions change, and none of your desired conclusions change. Instead, focus on getting the right information to the people that need to make those decisions. Give them better dashboards. Give them faster access to the information so that a human being can make those choices. And that I think we're going to see more applications that try and program that business logic, and they're going to end up failing because they're always going to be wrong. They're going to be consistently wrong, but they're not really going to help us.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So we can open it up to anything else related or on, if anyone's got a question. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.